All right, history and geography. We are on lesson 5 in the workbook, and this is on the conquest of Canaan, the settling of Canaan. We looked before at how the children of Israel went into the land of Canaan. Joshua, of course, leading them in that land and leading them on a major campaign to eliminate strongholds and to get rid of the organized defense, if you will, the larger groups that would oppose them. And we want to read Joshua 11, verses 18 to 23, and just notice some of the things that are mentioned there as it just summarizes what they've been through here. So Joshua 11, 18 to 23. Who's got that? Carter?
Joshua made war a long time with all those kings. There was not a city that made peace with the children of Israel except the Hivites, the inhabitants of Gibeon. All the others they took in battle, for it was of the Lord to harden their hearts, that they should come against Israel in battle, that he might utterly destroy them, and that they might receive no mercy, but that he might destroy them as the Lord had commanded Moses. And at that time Joshua came and cut off the Anakim from the mountains, from Hebron to Debir, from Anna, from all the mountains of Judah, and from all the mountains of Israel. Joshua utterly destroyed them with their cities. None of the Anakim were left in the land of the children of Israel. They remained only in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod. So Joshua took the whole land according to all that the Lord had said to Moses. And Joshua gave as an inheritance to Israel according to their divisions by their tribes. Then the land rested from the Lord.
Okay. So remember, they went in Jericho first, went up into the hill country. Essentially, when the Gibeonites were attacked, they essentially come in and cut the country in half. They go on a southern campaign, then they turn, they go on the northern campaign and took out those cities. And then this tells us there that they, even took care of those giants, the Anakim there. Some of them being left, Gaza and Gath. And by the way, that's where you believe there's a connection. It seems there's a connection to Goliath later on. But this is a summary of that. And so they go in and they take that land, and we want to get to the questions in the workbook on pages 21. I think it's page 21 where a whole list of questions is there. Which tribe was eventually absorbed by the tribe of Judah? As we think about them being settled in this land, and we're going to back up and go into some more detail, but which one was taken into Judah, absorbed essentially?
Simeon.
Right, Simeon, because as you can see there, they're settled within the territory of Judah. Which of Jacob's sons, question number 4, which of Jacob's sons did not receive a tribal allocation named after himself? Joseph, yeah. Sorry, you'll have to speak up. There's a little bit of noise here, and I'm getting more hard of hearing as time goes by. But Joseph didn't, and we'll talk about why that is in just a little bit. The city of Jerusalem located on the border of what two tribes? Judah and Benjamin. There's a little bit closer up. I don't know if you can see it. Almost just left of center there, Jebus, which becomes Jerusalem. It's right along that border area between Benjamin and Judah. And we'll talk more about some of these things in just a minute. Question 7, which of Jacob's sons listed on that question there did not receive a tribal allocation of land like that of his brothers? So what tribe's missing?
Levi.
Yeah, the tribe of Levi. And we'll talk more about that as well in just a minute. Question 8, what inheritance did the tribe of Levi receive? Joshua 13:33. Let's jump over there, Joshua 13, verse 33. Who will read that for us? Go ahead, Ron.
But to the tribe of Levi, Moses had given no inheritance,
The Lord God of Israel was their inheritance, as he had said to them.
Okay, so what's it driving at there? What's their inheritance? What does it mean that God is their inheritance?
Well, as we know, they were dedicated, and it was prescribed to them that they would be the ones to provide service and the priesthood and all of the worship. So they were the Lord's people in that sense.
Okay, yeah. And that, Mike.
I'd also say that because they really didn't receive anything, that they had a great faith that God would provide those things, and God provided those things for them.
Yeah, they had to have a faith. And we're going to see a little bit later about their cities, and they had common lands and things that they could use. But they don't have a distinct tribal area. They have... Some people see what was done with Levi was a punishment for Levi and Simeon and what they did in attacking Shechem and killing those men. I'm not sold on that. The priesthood was a great privilege for them to be able to serve the people in this way, to have that relationship with God. And from among the Levites, the priestly order after Aaron and having a high priest from them. I mean, the very one that went into the presence of God. You have to see that as a blessed and privileged responsibility in the nation of Israel. Ron and then Mike.
Stephen, as you talked previously, the other tribes were to provide for the tribe of Levi. And to me, the impression I've had, it was another way of God making a distinction about that, because they were a priesthood. Mm-hmm. And of course, we're a spiritual priesthood, but we see that, they belong to the Lord.
Right, yes. Yes, they belong to the Lord. The Lord was looking out after them through the rest of that nation. Ideally, that's how it was supposed to be. Mike, and then Paul.
You see that, it's an exclusive tribe. Like, no one else can do their positions for you at all. Matter of fact, the king Saul tried to do that. Can't do that.
Yeah, Saul and later, his name is slipping my mind. He went in, he was struck with leprosy, the priest pushed him out. Paul?
They were God's people, and the 10% that the congregation gave probably went mostly to the Levites.
Yeah, it was for the service of the things that they fulfilled, that they did. But yes, they received a certain portion of all that was brought in, including those sacrifices and stuff. And so they were provided for in that way. Now then, I want to look at the descendants of Jacob and his various wives here. If you look at this, you see through Leah, you've got Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun. What would we call them? How would you look at those men? What's the difference between them and, say, between Issachar and Benjamin? What's the difference in relationship? It's simple. I'm not trying to trick anybody. Yeah, there's full brothers versus half brothers, and so you see this break down in that way. Any other thoughts on that? I've got a couple. Can you see why Levi and Simeon would be the guys to lead the charge when something happened with Dinah? Yeah, that's their full sister. And that set them off. And then can you imagine why those 6 boys maybe would have a little more influence or pull in the family than the others? You've got Reuben and Judah. When it goes back, this is backing up into Genesis, but you have Reuben and Judah, who are the 2 guys trying to work things out when something comes up with Joseph. Judah, of course, wins the day in his argument, But it's interesting, you've got those two guys who are the ones, basically, it's one or the other of them is going to win the day on the argument. But they're those full brothers. And so they kind of stick together. And then, of course, you see the other ones. And it's also interesting that Leah had as many children, at least as many boys, as the other three put together. And that, again, is an indication about God and the way He sees that relationship and all of that. But this is the breakdown of it. All of them, you see them broken up into the territories. I do want to get to Genesis 48. I want to back up. Because per the chart up here and what we know in reading, of course, who was the firstborn to Jacob? Reuben. His firstborn male descendant was Reuben. In Genesis chapter 48, I would like us to read 1 through 6, please. 1 through 6. Who's got this for us? Go ahead, Tanner.
God came about after these things, and Joseph was told, behold, the father is sick. So he took his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, with him. When it was told to Jacob, behold, your son Joseph has come to you. Israel collected his strength and sat up in the bed. And Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me. And he said to me, behold, I will make you fruitful and numerous, and I will make you a company of peoples. And you give this land to your descendants after you for an everlasting possession. Now your two sons, who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt, are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, as Reuben and Simeon are. But your offspring that have been born after them shall be yours. They shall be called by the names of their brothers and their inheritance.
Okay, so what's he saying here? What is Jacob doing? Mike?
I think he's providing for Joseph's son, it seems like one's trying to kind of take the onus of home.
Okay. Philip?
Seems to me he's giving Joseph a double portion.
He's adopting Manasseh and Ephraim as his heirs. He says they're going to be like Reuben and Simeon. So look at the chart here. Reuben and Simeon, first and second born to Leah. So Reuben and Simeon would be 1 and 2 as far as the heir, like the firstborn heir, and receive the firstborn inheritance and things like that. If something happened with Reuben, which it did. Something happened with Simeon, yes, it did. With Levi, yes. But very often, I think some people have looked at Judah as being the firstborn heir. Now, Judah was the one through whom Christ would come, and he definitely became the leader of the brothers. But as far as inheritance, Joseph is the one that Jacob picked through Rachel. So go to 1 Chronicles chapter 5. 1 Chronicles chapter 5, and this explicitly states it here. 1 Chronicles 5, and let's read verses 1 and 2. Who's got this for us? 1 Chronicles 5, 1 and 2. Go ahead, Carter.
Now the son of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, he was indeed the firstborn, but because he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph, the son of Israel, so that the genealogy is not listed according to the birthright. Yet Judah prevailed over his brothers, and from him came a ruler, although the birthright was Joseph's.
Okay, so very explicitly explaining this, and as Mike said, there's this double portion that's being given here, and that's why when you get down into the settling of the land of Canaan, Joseph doesn't appear as a territory, a tribe. It's Ephraim and Manasseh, because they've been adopted by Jacob back there in the book of Genesis, and they grew as their own separate people with distinct identities. And then when they settle in the land of Canaan, they've got their own places, their own territories. And Manasseh of course, having both on the east and the west side. Any other thoughts there? All right, jumping down then to, let's go back to Joshua 13, then we'll get to Deuteronomy chapter 7 in just a moment. But Joshua chapter 13, and it tells us in verse 1 that Joshua's old, advanced in years, and that there's a lot of land yet to be possessed. In verses 6 and 7, Joshua 13 says, all the inhabitants of the mountains from Lebanon as far as the brook of Mizraphoth, and all the Sidonians, them I will drive out from before the children of Israel, only divide it by lot to Israel as an inheritance, as I have commanded you. Now therefore divide this land as an inheritance to the 9 tribes and half the tribe of Manasseh. So remember, they've already settled on the east. That's a locked-in deal. And here in Joshua chapter 13, he's saying you need to figure out where these guys are going on the west side of the Jordan. So that's that point of reference in Joshua chapter 13. But we go to Deuteronomy chapter 7. Deuteronomy 7, understanding that major campaign is done, and now the tribes themselves are to go into their allotted territories and to do the cleanup operation, if you will. The villages, the little towns, the places that may remain, they're responsible for cleaning that up and getting rid of those people. So Deuteronomy chapter 7, let's read 21 through 26 here. Hank, do you have that?
Deuteronomy 7, 21 and 26?
Down through 26, yes, sir.
Moreover, the Lord your God will send the hornet among
Okay, you're in 20. Go ahead. Keep going.
Moreover, the Lord your God will send the hornets among them until those who are left, who hide themselves from you and are destroyed. You shall not be terrified of them, for the Lord your God, the great and awesome God, is among you. And the Lord your God will drive out these nations before you, little by little. You will be unable to destroy them at once, lest the beasts of the field become too numerous for you. But your Lord, your God, will deliver them over you and will inflict defeat upon them until they are destroyed. And he will deliver their kings into your hands, and you will destroy their names from under the heaven. No one shall be able to stand against you until you have destroyed them. You shall burn the carved images of your God with fire. You shall not cover the silver or gold that is on you, nor take it for yourselves, lest you be snared by it. For it is an abomination to the Lord your God. Nor shall you bring an abomination to your house, lest you be doomed to destruction like it. You shall be utterly detested. You shall utterly detest it and utterly abhor it, for it is a cursed thing.
Okay, so he tells them you got to go into the land, drive out those inhabitants of the land. And again, this is a chart showing the various tribes of people who were there, various nations, city-states that were in the land, and how they'd have to go in and clean them out. But how does he say that's going to occur? Why?
Well, if you attack many nations at one time, often soon you will fail because it's just overwhelming. Just, I'm saying.
Philip?
It says that if you destroy them all at once, the beasts will become too numerous for you.
Right. So there's a practicality. God says, I'm going to give you this land, and you're going to go in, and it's going to take time for you to fully take control of that and have all the territory, possessions, resources, all those things. It's just going to take time. What would that require?
Patience.
Patience. Right. Lots of patience to get in there and to do that over time. Mike?
I think also a faith that God is going to come through with His promise, even though we may not see it instantaneously. We know it's in the future. I think it's a good lesson for us.
Okay, so go ahead, Ron, then Carrie.
The other thought I had about this, Stephen, is that he wanted these things completely destroyed. And by doing it little by little, it is a comprehensive approach to taking over that land.
Right. Methodical, consistent, persistent, and endure to get this done. Carrie?
It also requires sacrifice on their part. They're not going to just be handed the land to take over. They're going to have to work for it. Suffer some consequences of war.
Exactly right. So this is kind of, if you were at a perspective of, 1,000, 2,000 feet up, looking from the Jordan Valley west across there, you can see in the far ground there, the distance is the Mediterranean. But it's a very rough country over there. It's not, yes, there are some places where there are flat valleys and things like that, but it's hilly, very, very hilly throughout the entire area, and they're going to have to go in. That's rough work to do. So they're doing that, and to the point that was made about, burn their carved images, you'll not covet them, you'll not covet the silver or gold, you'll not take them for yourselves, and all of that. There would be a temptation for them to take war prizes. Every war pretty much that has ever been, when one group of soldiers goes into the enemy territory, there's things they collect as just prizes, as booty coming out of the war. I mean, in World War II, if they could get a German officer's Luger, oh man, that was a great thing. And just little bits and pieces of things. And the Lord is in part telling them here, don't grab those idols thinking, oh, this is something neat. I'm going to grab it. I'm just going to hold on to it. Because He says over time, that's going to ensnare you. Don't look at that silver. Don't look at that gold and think, ooh, this is something I really want to get a hold of. Don't do that. You need to destroy those things, as the Lord had said earlier in Deuteronomy chapter 7. You need to destroy their altars, destroy those idols. Those aren't things you can keep. Now, they got pots and pans and plates and jewelry and clothing and whatever. Okay, you can grab that stuff, but do not grab these idols. Mike?
I'd also say, whenever He tells them this is going to take a little bit of time, their sin is what slows the progression of that. So not only is it going to take more time, but they're doing things inefficiently whenever they dabble into these things. And we see that the first time that they really take up all of the land is whenever Saul is there in power. So it does take, just like God said, with the time period of judges, how there's so many setbacks.
Okay. So to that point, they go into the land. They've done the major work of cleaning out those strongholds. They're given their allotments. The tribe migrates into those allotments. They take over whatever town. They take over the homes. They're there in that town. And what are they going to have to start doing to live there? What's that? What will they have to do to live there?
They'll have to start working.
They're going to have to plant crops or harvest crops. If they move in at a time when their crops are ready to be harvested, they got to go out and harvest. But they got to plant, they got to harvest. They have to set up things for their animals. They have to look after them. They're going to have to get them out to pasture and to water. And they're going to have to fix their homes in the town and whatever else. There would be practical day-to-day things, but also they're still charged with, you need to get rid of these people. So they've got the day-to-day things just to live there they've got to take care of, but then they have to go and take care of those people. Now, let me ask you this. Let's just say that we had the task, I don't know, you need to go to Zimbabwe. And you need to take that land, and you got to go in, and the main strongholds, the military bases, they're gone, but all these little villages, you need to drive these people out. And you're there, and you set up, and there's people living around you that know you're there to get rid of them. How well would you sleep at night? What would you do? Every single day, just as a practical matter. What would you as a group of people do? What would you do overnight? What would you do in the mornings? What would you do in the afternoons?
Well, they would have Coast Guard. They have to guard their family.
Their flocks.
While the men are going to fight, they have to leave a garrison back home. They would have to set up some type of rotational guard for at night.
Okay, you have to think about this. They're going into this land. It's not as though, Joshua's done all this big work and we're going to go in and just kick back and everything's good, set up shop. They're still on a war footing. They still have to be mindful. There are people here who don't want us here. There are people who want to take our animals, who want to kill the men, who want to take the women and children. They want to retake these cities that we have wiped out. It's not as though they're going in and everything's fine. They're on a constant war footing. They're going to have to be vigilant. They have to send patrols out. They need to know what's going on. They have to be very sober-minded. Hank.
Their occupation would be, once they occupy, they would have levels of, okay, we don't need this many guards, so let's downsize it. And then they had spur new insurgents, and they would bring it back up. That would be a daily event. We would figure out, how many we need today.
Okay, so Hank, with your experience, maybe you can chime in on this. However you feel about the United States in the past 20, 22 years and everything we've done overseas, the reality is our military being in Afghanistan, there wasn't really a time that they could just say, you know what, everything's okay. Let's not worry. There's always somebody out there, and it would take time. And so you think about this, when they're going into this land of Canaan, we're not talking about a year or 2 years or 3 years. We're probably talking 20, 30 years to fully eradicate the people out of the territory and even Israel to increase their population to be able to hold these areas that they're going into. But it would take decades to go in and do this. And that means they've got to have resolve to get this done. And it can't die from one generation to the next, because if it does, then they're going to fail. And of course, we have preview. I don't want to get into everything else that eventually unfolds, but that has to be the mindset going into this. And so, to your point, Mike, what about us? Are we in a constant war footing? Yes. We're surrounded by the enemy, who doesn't want us here. They don't want us to be here, to be a light in this world, to conquer the world for Christ. They don't want us here. Our enemy wants to retake any territory we have taken, if you will. And so we have to be sober-minded. We have to be constantly vigilant. We have to be patient. Let's go to James chapter 5 just to read this. James 5 verses 7 through 11 there. Who will grab this for us? Clint?
Be patient, therefore, brothers, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, being patient about it until it receives the early and late rains. You also be patient, establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Do not grumble against one another, brothers, so that you may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. As an example of suffering and patience, brothers, Take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. Behold, and consider those blessed who remain steadfast. You have heard of the steadfastness of Job, and you have seen the purpose of the Lord, how the Lord is compassionate and merciful.
Okay. And in that context, he's talking more about enduring the trials, the suffering of life. But it's the idea you have to be patient and you have to endure. You have to keep pressing forward no matter what the situation may be, because we have a conquest that we have to fulfill. We need to get done. And God promised to be with Israel and to give them the land, but it was still hard work and it was mentally tough for them. You can just imagine that the people going into that land, let's just say, they settle in the Judean mountains, and they're like, we've been fighting for 5 years. I would just like 1 year where we're not fighting, and let's just raise our crops. Let's look after the grandbabies. Let's enjoy the fruits of our labor. So let's ease up here, and let's just take a month. Let's just take 2 months. Let's just take 3 months, and 5, 6, 7 years into it. Oh well. You know what? These people, we've gotten to know some of them. They're kind of not that bad, and so let's leave them alone, and then let's leave these guys alone. And boy, I'm just exhausted. And before long, you're not doing your job anymore. Mike, did you have something?
With this generation, they're laying that foundation so the future generation can find some peace. But that doesn't mean the future generation just gets to lay back and do nothing.
Exactly.
That first century, and how the church was built, a lot of sacrifice was given to the point that we can have the freedoms that we have today and still be able to proclaim God's word, and things like that through the Bible and everything else. And you look at all that sacrifice that was laid for us, that does not give us the right to sit back and do nothing.
Okay, to your point, that second generation that was in Canaan, they were there because of the blood, sweat, and tears of the ones who went before. We have this Bible literally because people were willing to shed blood for it. Just like we have this country because people were willing to die for it. People were willing to die for the Word of God, to pass it on to the next generation. We need to have that same mindset or mentality. And so we've got a great conquest ahead of us. Other thoughts there? All right. So shifting gears just a little bit to the actual landscape of Israel at this time. And it was heavily forested. Let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 22. 1 Samuel 22, I know from our perspective, we see that land and much of the imagery from that land, even as we've shown in this class, looks arid, and it is an arid climate overall, but it looks arid, looks mostly desert-like from our perspective, especially living in this part of the country when we have all this green, especially this year. We have a lush, plush environment around us. And it's not like that over there, but we don't want to think that it was just simply desert, because it wasn't. 1 Samuel 22 and verse 5, it makes note there, the prophet Gad said to David, "Do not stay in the stronghold, depart and go to the land of Judah." So David departed and went into the forest of Hereth. And then there are other places where these forests are mentioned, and various kinds of trees are mentioned. If you notice there is at the bottom of page 20-something there. I should have written that down. 24 with the trees, and it mentions it's got the passages and the various trees that are there. I just want to run through some of these real quick. So there's a picture of a forest over there in Israel, and that's modern times right there. There's the acacia tree. I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with that. Here's another one a little bit different species maybe, or it's grown longer. I'm not totally familiar with all these things. But anyways, that's the acacia tree. Of course, they made a lot of things of acacia wood, particularly the Ark of the Covenant, various things made of that. But that's the kind of tree that they would have used in doing that. And then in Ecclesiastes 12:5, what does it mention there about an old man?
Almond tree.
Yeah, almond tree, blossoms like an almond tree. What does that mean?
White hair.
Yeah, white hair. So there's an almond tree that is in Israel proper. You can see the close-up of the almond flower there, it budding out. But it's talking about an older man having gray hair. Talks about apples, apple trees, or the apple of my, various things like that. Song of Solomon mentions that. Of course, there's palms, date palms. They do have a date that comes off of those. But they look like that. When they're in a deserty area, they kind of get brownish just because, just like your house or your windows or your car, if it sits in the dirt and it rains, it's just going to get dirty up around it. But anyways, that's how that looks. And then the cedars, Judges chapter 9 mentions the cedars. What cedars are famous over there, by the way, even to this day? Yeah, the Cedars of Lebanon, which is just north of there. A lot of things written about Solomon building the temple, and I think it's Hiram sent Cedars of Lebanon down. But that's one here. It looks a little different than our cedar tree. This one does. There are other cedars over there that are very similar to ours, but this is one. Very interesting types of trees, but they're very famous over there. And then this is one of the oaks that's over there. And we're familiar with oaks, but a little bit different species of oak over there. But looking at all of that, understand that there were forests there throughout the land, various types of trees, vegetation all around it. There were areas of land that were unusable, that would not have been desirable for anybody to have. A lot of that ridge that runs along that Jordan Valley there, those steep slopes, they really couldn't do anything with those. It's just, at least not in ancient times. In modern times, some of it's been done with modern machines and things. They've taken that over. But there's just some of it that's just not desirable to have. Now, the cities for the Levites. I think I'm going to hit on something else here. Okay. So I have these out of order. Now, so we'll go ahead and touch on this. Numbers chapter 26 has that list of the numbering of the children of Israel before they went into the land of Canaan. And it shows that they didn't lose manpower. They didn't lose population between when they left Egypt and then 40 years later when they're going into the land. And these are the numbers for the tribes there. And it's just interesting to look at this and think about, okay, these various tribes, their various territories, roughly on the chart here, going in and populating that. Manasseh split in half, and I know Dan is split as well because it's hard to see on this, but at the Manasseh on the east side, if you go straight north of the Sea of Galilee and you keep going, there's a little sliver of Dan there that they go and they settle. The book of Judges talks about part of that tribe moves up to the north, and so it's a very small territory. So Dan, the 64,400 down south, a portion of them end up moving up north, but just go with what we've got here. Manasseh, if it is exactly half on each side, 26,350, 52,700, I think it is. What's the largest tribe? Judah, right? And so they have the largest territory of all the other tribes. They're allotted that, but then Simeon is given a portion of that, and you can see why Simeon is absorbed into Judah over time because of the relative sizes. Well, eventually Judah, and just naturally being around each other, they're going to end up intermarrying each other, and So Judah just ends up absorbing them over time. And then you can look at this and think about, oh, that's interesting, how you have a tribe like Zebulun of 60,500. It seems like they've got a little bitty spot. And then Manasseh, that doesn't even have that much, they have these two big territories on either side. But as you go down through Old Testament times, you understand that these numbers shift over time, and Manasseh, I believe, outpopulated. Ephraim definitely grows to the point that there are times in the divided kingdom where the northern kingdom is referred to as Ephraim, because they are the dominant tribe, just like the southern is referred to as Judah, even though it's Judah, Benjamin, Simeon in theory is there. And the Levites, if you go back, and maybe we'll get to this when we study through it, in the divided kingdom, the Levites actually moved down into Judah when that kingdom divides. But anyways, just some interesting thoughts about that. Now, the cities for the Levites. Let's go to Numbers 35, because this is where these things are laid out initially, about cities for the Levites. Numbers 35, and let's read here verses 1 through 3, please. Numbers 35, 1 to 3. Carter?
And the Lord spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho, saying, Command the children of Israel that they give the Levites cities to dwell in from their inheritance of their possession, and you shall also give the Levites common land around the cities. They shall have the cities to dwell in, and their common land shall be for their cattle, for their herds, and for all their animals.
Okay, so they've got the cities that they're given, and the ones on the chart up here, the ones that they are eventually given, that's their place to live, and to have that common land around it for their animals and whatever else they may need, maybe crops they're growing, things like that. But these are spread throughout the land of Israel. And why are they spread throughout the land of Israel? Why not give them just one little territory? Paul?
They were ministering to the people, so they had to be where they could get going.
How were they ministering to the people?
Well, they collected their 10%. They taught them righteousness.
Okay. Their main job was teaching that law. And so they needed to be spread among the people to be able to disperse that and keep that alive among the nation. And so you've got those territories. When you get down to verse 14, it talks about the fact that they've got these cities of refuge. There's 3 on the east side of Jordan, 3 on the west side of Jordan. And what was the purpose of the cities of refuge?
It was a place that someone could flee to if they committed manslaughter, not first-degree murder. And they would go there, and they would have to wait until, I can't remember exactly, but there would be a change of it.
Yeah, the high priest. The high priest, when he died, they could go back to their territory, yeah.
But if they fled or left that city, then they could be avenged.
Fair game, right. So this was a way to provide refuge for people that got caught in a bad situation and to be protected. So these, as I understand it, essentially wherever you lived in the land of Israel, because of where these are dispersed, you could get to one of these cities within about a day. So they were accessible. If something happened, they could flee to them and find that protection in those cities of refuge. And those were Levitical cities as well, the Levites looking out after them. All right, so you've got them going in. And one of the things, by the way, that shows that they settled this land as God intended is you have the cities of refuge that are set up. And so that was part of that, occupying the fullness of the land. And we go to Joshua chapter 21 now. Joshua 21, verses 43 to 45. And who will read that for us? Joshua 21, 43 to 45. Go ahead, Josh.
So the Lord gave to Israel all the land which he had sworn to give to his fathers, and took possession of it and dwelt in it. The Lord gave them rest all around, according to all that he had sworn to their fathers. Not the man of all their enemies stood against them. The Lord delivered all their enemies into their hand. Not the word fell from them against them, the Lord spoke to the house of Israel, all came possession.
Okay. So right there it's definitive that what God had promised them, he fulfilled regarding that land. So you've got a nation promise, you have a land promise that at this point both have been fulfilled by God. The only promise left to fulfill was the seed promise, which Galatians 3:16 explicitly says that seed was Christ. And so the one through whom all the families of the earth would be blessed. But they're in this land. They've been allotted their territories. The tribes go into their territories. They still have, the other things to do to completely drive the people out. But it's interesting to me, the character of that generation. In Joshua chapter 22, beginning there in about verse 10 down to the rest of the chapter, you have those 2.5 tribes that are returning to their home territory on the east side of the Jordan, and they pause at Jordan and they build that massive altar. And what did that trigger? You remember the account?
It nearly triggered civil war.
Okay, what did these 9.5 tribes think was going on?
The other tribes had gone off, were going their own way. And, basically, we're going to break the relationship with the other tribes.
Yeah, they thought they've gone into idolatry here, building this altar over there where they're going to worship their gods and things. And so they go and confront them about it. And they explain, no, this is actually just a memorial to remind your people that we belong with you. Don't let this river be a barrier between us and, our descendants. And so we belong as one people. And they're like, okay, that's good. That's fine. We didn't build it for worship. We built it just as a memorial. And so they smooth that out. But that's the character of that generation. We're going to fight our own brothers. In fact, you think about, you got half tribe of Manasseh. You got the Manasseh on the west side that said, we're not going to put up with this. If that's what you're doing, we're not going to tolerate that. But it wasn't that. They were all committed to serving God at this point, and they're very serious about it. All of them are. Mike?
But they were reasonable about it. I mean, they went
Yes.
They wanted to know what the truth was. They took their presuppositions of what they thought and made sure that what they thought was in accordance with reality.
Yes. Yes, exactly right. They were very wise in the way that they approached this. All right, so one other thing here. Israel is admonished by Joshua in chapter 23, chapter 24, and told to remain faithful to God. Remember Joshua 24, 14 and 15, where he says there, now therefore fear the Lord, serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the river and in Egypt. Serve the Lord, and if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. What did the people answer? 16, 17 following. What did they say?
Far be it from us that we should forsake you.
We are absolutely going to serve God. Verse 31, Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua, all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had known all the works of the Lord, which he had done for Israel. So they were faithful during that time period. It was a great generation, if you will, the greatest generation for Israel. The only other time that really comes close to matching it is under David and his rule and reign. All right, thank y'all. Lord willing, let's go on to lesson number 6. Lesson number 6.